Imagine telling Kevin De Bruyne what to do. So if you've got this stat, and I do the same thing with Alex Mitchell, he's the most beautiful rugby player to watch. He creates space for anyone around him. Imagine me trying to tell him where the space is going to be. I don't know. I want him to make decisions because that's what he's really good at. I would believe that's what, Kevin De Bruyne has in his head.
Sam Vesty is the head coach of current Premiership Rugby champions Northampton Saints, whose attacking style has made him one of the sport's most exciting coaches, with some of England's brightest talents at his disposal, including George Furbank, Henry Pollock, and of course Fin Smith. We're going to talk about those very guys now and a few others as well, Sam, because nurturing talent and growing stars is not an easy job to do, and yet you are doing it all over the place. What is the secret to doing this the right way round? Share it immediately.
Well, I think that the whole club's bought into, we're a development club. We want to bring our guys from the academy and we want to bring them up to play for us as a first team and then hopefully go on to international honours and British Lions honours. And I think the academy do a fantastic job. And part of that, and I think the big part of what to grow that talent is getting an understanding of, do they know what we want from them as players, and then the consistency of coaching that and then putting it under masses of pressure and having an environment where you can make mistakes, where you can put yourself under so much pressure that we want mistakes, because if we have a session where the ball doesn't hit the floor, we're not training hard enough. We're not going to improve. So I think and that stretches right from our academy, and they do such a good job all the way through. So the guys that I get to work with have come out of our academy are already have already made some good steps on the way up the ladder, and it just keeps going. And it's
and as they climb up that ladder, though, does their fear of failure become a bigger problem because there's more jeopardy on the line? Because I kind of feel like I can understand this idea of make your mistakes early, but then everything, there's more on it later. If you make mistakes later, there's more riding on that. But how important is it to just keep that train of thought going so that they play with creativity and freedom to do just that?
Yeah, I think it's how, as a club, you react to those mistakes. So if it's a skill error, we're all going to make mistakes, and no one's played a perfect game of rugby. Dupont is the world's best player, and he makes loads of mistakes, but he does so many good things that, they completely outweigh all those mistakes. And I think the way we react to those mistakes, those skill errors, is really important. Whereas, and the difference being, if there's an effort mistake, an effort error, I'd react, or as a coaching group, we would react very differently. So we would go really hard on the effort error. And
so what is an effort error?
Someone not running back to make their tackle, someone not committing to run the hard line that they know that they should do, through unwillingness or lazy actions and that sort of thing. We'll go really hard at that sort of stuff. But actually, decision making and skill errors, you're going to make. We don't live in a perfect world where they're not going to happen. So we have to embrace them and have an understanding that our training's going to look like that, and be happy with that. And I think over time that rubs off on the players, and some players still get really nervous, but trying to keep them in that headspace where they're really pushing themselves, they push their skills all week, and then effectively they're going to go and do what they've done all week on a Saturday, and try and keep that mindset that it's not going out there and doing it in front of 20,000 people, 40,000 people, 80,000 people is still the same as what you're doing on the training pitch. And actually, it's doing those simple things consistently. If you do the simple things 10 times in a row, that is amazing. Like, that's what the world's best players are doing, the simple things over and over and over again. And then someone will do something that's, you know, really flashy and cool, but they're not searching for those things.
So talk to me about Fin Smith. I mean, he's made headlines in recent weeks for his Six Nations contribution, and he's been, you know, a real star of the show. Talk to me about his early journey and how you've worked with him and how you've grown him and helped him develop over that time.
Yeah, so Finn came from Worcester, and unfortunately when they went down, but I'd had my eye on him. I was a coach at Worcester quite a long time before that, and knew Finn a little bit through him working with the really junior ages and kept my eye on him. And the one thing that really stood out with Finn was how at 19, 20, how much of a character he was and how driven he was. And you could see it from watching a group huddle. You could see it how he played, and you know, he wasn't the biggest of dudes, but wanted to go and put himself in some, you know, awkward positions. So I, you know, wanted to have the chance to work with him, and he's hard on himself. He's wants to be better at everything constantly, works really hard on the training pitch. And if you put you've got those characteristics in an environment that we encourage, one of our big mottos is we get better and better and better and better, and just keep striving for that. And everything's the whole thing is facilitating that. In a Fin, you're gonna get real improvements, and you know, fair play to him with what he's done and what he can put on the pitch now. And I mean, thoroughly deserved that. I'd hope he's the England number 110, because I think he sort of put in some really big performances there, and thoroughly deserved.
And do you think, like, suddenly significantly having such a major contribution on a national team level, what does that do to a player? What do you see when a player like that comes back to his club side? Because it must grow them immeasurably in ways they can't even sort of comprehend.
Yeah.
But you must see it as a coach. You must really see it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, yeah, every time he's been away with England a few times and not quite got where he's wanted to get, but he comes back a little bit hungrier, a little bit more with his eyes open, a little bit knowing where he needs to go. And that's probably happened sort of 2-3 times when he's been involved and not quite got on the pitch. And then this time he's come back, and to be honest, when he came back, he looked shattered, because you come straight back off the Six Nations. Mentally, it's tough, really tough. You get scrutinised in absolutely everything. He's all over the media. So it's a tough place for him. So he's shattered, but actually as a player, he's now, you know, holding himself that little bit taller, and plays that little bit bigger. I don't know. It is hard to actually define, but you can definitely see it.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine that would happen. It would just grow you up a little bit, wouldn't
it?
Henry Pollock, let's talk about him, because he's a real rising star as well, and you've been pivotal in his journey too. What's the potential you saw in him, and how have you been able to sort of just maximise and optimise that in him?
I mean, to be honest, it's about not getting in the way, because Henry...
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think if you try and put too much structure on things, if you try and be too driven, when you're in this situation, do this, when you'll do this, you can sort of slow people's heads. There's nothing that stops you on a rugby pitch like thinking. In life, nothing that stops you like thinking. So allowing that to happen, and sort of, I've given Henry very few bits of coaching, really. I'd say you're a little bit greedy, Henry. Look to use some of your other teammates and you'll be an even better rugby player. And just get that thought in his head, and he's good enough to know exactly how to action that. And then give him a million opportunities in our training week, on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, for him to get better at it. And I'd say don't get in his way. And I think there's quite a lot to be said for that.
Somebody whose way you have had to get into recently is George Furbank.
Oh, yeah.
I read that you were like the level 1. He's in level 1 tackling, and you right now are in his sights because it involves you.
Yeah.
Just sort of talk to me about that and why that's the case, and sort of how you bring someone back from injury.
Well, it's not always this case, but George was coming back from a broken arm, and he needed to test it, and he needed to test it on a
against
on
you.
a crash test dummy that was a little bit soft and a little bit slow and a little bit. So I was the level 1, and Lee Radford, who's got a good few stone on me, was the level 2. And George passed with flying colours, to be fair.
I was going to say, did he pass with flying colours?
He did. I mean, I was a bit sore for a few days, but he was fine.
But again, like, you know, working with this young group of guys who are clearly super talented and showing so much potential, how important is it to keep them like available? So try and prevent those injuries so they get those opportunities to prove it on the you know, the club stage, but also the, you know, the world stage, and also, like, you know, taking them on that journey from like academy players to club players to hopefully, like you say, international stars.
Yeah, I think the second part of that, I think, is there's lots of stuff we do on the training pitch which is around, you know, problem solving and sort of grow, and then there's also, and then training really hard to a really highly skilled, pushing our decisions. So like that's on the training pitch, really sort of working on those two bits, and then there's a bit off the pitch where we're trying to grow, help the individual and help that group really take leadership and take ownership of the game, because they're the guys out there on the pitch who are going to be doing it. And a couple of years ago, we sort of had this discussion that, like, boys, this is your back line. Go and drive this back line. And, you know, you've got your Finns in there, your Ferbses, your Fraser Dingwalls, who really took this and drove it. And honestly, now I reckon if I just didn't turn up to a session, they'd go, well, "Where's Sam?" But then they'd probably go, "Right, well, we'll crack on with this. We'll do this, and this week we'll do this play and that play." And then, you know, they're good like that. That sort of problem solving part of it, and I think that helps.
Is that as a result of the sort of environment that you've created around them to make sure that they can sort of step up and own their own sort of decision making, and you're a sounding board as much as anything else to validate decisions and ideas? Yeah,
and I think that sounds a little bit wishy-washy, because there are other elements that I hold us to very strongly to account for, and I go hard at those bits. But that decision making, problem solving bit, they're the ones on the pitch that are going to actually have to do it. And I'm a big believer in, like, every week in our batch units meetings, we'll have one of the guys up presenting on something. Like Ollie Slights did fishing last year, and, you know, like, we're doing this.
So it's like a grown-up rugby version of show and tell.
I mean,
at
literally.
School. It's that, is it? So you can do it on anything you like.
That one you could. We've just done one recently. It involved myself and Finn and Dingers breaking into George Furbank's house post midnight.
What are you talking about? Was that like some kind of like Michael McIntyre kind of sketch?
Exactly
was
that.
it that?
Yeah,
was it?
Yeah.
No. Which person sold him out?
Well,
which person left the key under the mat?
Dingers was feeding his fish, so he had a key from a little while ago. But it's that sort of stuff. We're enjoying that company. They enjoy their own company together, but also taking responsibility for. Dingers had to take responsibility for putting a meeting out to all the players, and I'm going to talk in front of the group, and all the academy guys do it. The first thing you do when you come into the academy in the backs is to do my life in 5 pages.
Do they get nervous? Because it's one thing performing in front of a crowd of 20, 40, 80,000 if that's your kind of gig. It's another thing entirely having to present to your peers or whatever something that's off subject, right?
Yeah, but that's it, isn't it? That's what we're trying to help be the best you. And if you can be uncomfortable and still deliver and still, I think it's important. I think it's really important. You know, alongside all of the rugby stuff, Not you couldn't just do that, but yeah, I do. I think
that's what they might end up doing if you take that morning off work, which you just talked
maybe.
about.
Maybe.
I interrupted you? What did you say that they do? They come in and talk about the 5 minutes of.
Well, they do their My Life in 5 photos. So you basically show, you can do anything, but a lot of times people show, how they were brought up, how they got into rugby, where their family are from. Meet some of the wider family maybe, or.
Oh, come on, that's got to get messy.
Fun.
My life in 5 photos. There must be one outlier in that bunch,
often
which is
yeah.
It's just, throws the conversation in a different direction.
Yeah.
What's the most memorable one of those that you've had from the current crew?
Hutch. But there's quite a few. I remember Hutch's off the top of my head because he's very. We all take the mick out of him for being ultra posh. So he took us around this monster manor that wasn't his house and pretended he lived in, Buckingham Palace basically. But it was all very funny.
It was an April Fool's stitch-up, was it?
Pretty much.
Oh, it sounds good. But there is a serious point to this, I guess, isn't it? What you are trying to create is community, camaraderie, that kind of feeling like you've each got each other's back. I mean, when you look at the successful rugby teams, and any team actually over the years that are performing at the top level, there is this sort of, I spoke to Mike Tyndall about this in our pod previously, but there's definitely just almost like a total understanding, right? That you can each read each other on the field of play because you've worked together, you've known each other, you've lived with each other for such a long period of time. You really understand what's coming next. It's instinctive.
100%. And I think we talk about being connected on the pitch, and part of that is, I think, being connected off the pitch and having those understandings, and it all helps, when you're on the pitch under pressure, that you can still stay connected and still, be thinking the same things. That's sort of what you're trying to often get.
What is central to developing these players and keeping them in the right place, of course, Sam, is this role of recovery in elite sport and making sure that they are always available, these guys, so they're able to realise their opportunities. I mean, there cannot be a sport that is more in tune with where it needs to be, where recovery is concerned, presumably, as rugby.
No, you're dead right. It's and it's come such a long way since I've known it. And, we used to train. I always remember talking to Martin Johnson when he first went. There was a day when he was a banker, and then the next day they were professional rugby players, and they didn't know what to do, so they basically trained for 2 hours twice a day. And from there, we've come a long way in terms of understanding how much we need to train to get the desired outcome at the end of the week, but also taking into account the cost of that on the players, and the cost of the game at the end of the week on the players as well. And
so during a season, what does that look like? What does the week look like during a season for those players?
So if it looks now like you play on a Saturday, have Sunday off, but a lot of boys will go and do some active recovery. And if you've taken a knock, you're probably you're in to see the physios on the Sunday. You're getting things in ice machines if you've taken a bit of a knock. And then Monday is a recovery morning, so that is you're in and around all the saunas, the colds, the massage, all of that soft tissue part of it, and then. There'll be a few meetings in and around that Monday. There'll be a little bit of a training on the Monday, and that training is pretty low key, sort of 20 minutes, 30 minutes of low key skills. Sort of the skills is hard, but the running and there's no contact in it and all of that. So that'll be there Monday, and then by Tuesday is effectively. And this is the sort of, I'd say this is consistent to most clubs, would be their hard day. That's when they're putting in, they'd also be in the gym on the Monday as well. And and working hard in the gym. But then on the Tuesday, that's your sort of long day, that's your hard day. And some teams will do double days. Some teams, so you'll train in the morning and in the afternoon. As the season progresses, that might shorten, or it might become one session. They'll also be in the gym on that day. And after all of the sessions, the expectation is that you are recovering in in the ice baths, all the soft tissue stuff, the massage and the cold and the saunas and all of that sort of stuff. Lots of the boys now have, bought their own saunas, so they'll have a sauna in their back. So when they go home, they'll be able to do hot and cold of an evening to help them recover. Wednesday would be off, and they'll all go for a coffee, which is just what rugby players always do. Thursday, we're then sort of tapering to the game, so that'll be a fast session, shorter in time, but the intensity is up. So the blocks of actual training times are shorter, but it's really fast. And again, they'll be recovering. On Friday, we do a thing called 150 touches, which is basically playing games. So you come in and we have a meeting, and then we'll play little football games, or sort of not football games, sorry, football, tennis, passing the balls against a wall, catching tennis balls, slip catching, just to keep the hand-eye in. But there's no demand on the legs. Ready for round 2 on the Saturday.
And how many rugby players are ever operating at 100% full fitness?
I've never met one, to be honest. But honestly, it's you get used to, and if you are the type of athlete that thinks you have to be at that level, rugby's probably not the game for you, because you just can't. You're not going to be able to put together 3 or 4 games without getting something that's just going to be holding you back slightly. And all of this is designed to keep the players as close to 100% as we possibly can. So it's all very well, but realistically, no, they're not. When a guy goes out to run the 100 meters at the Olympics, you would expect him to be at his absolute peak. But he hasn't got to tackle 20 stone blokes, has he? The week before. So there's
You'd hope not.
Yeah. I think Usain Bolt would be quite good at rugby, actually, if he's a big lad, isn't he?
If he's up for it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Usain. Come and try rugby. Forget football. Come and try rugby. But presumably also you have to, taking, the recovery story pretty seriously, you also presumably have to really prioritise. Like you said, you talked at the beginning about how Martin Johnson went from one day being a banker to being a professional player. So the game has massively evolved, but so too, right, has the understandings of what can really help you professionalise yourself as an asset. We talk a lot about it with the sailing team with Ben, how can the athletes, the marginal gains, how can you eke them out here, there and wherever? So sleep, nutrition, all those other things, how much do they come into play as well in terms of looking after the asset, which is the player?
Yeah, and I think the players are taking a lot more responsibility, for that sort of stuff. They're really delving into the new, and I'm thinking the sleep stuff. They take a real ownership of that sort of stuff. The nutrition at the club is provided to a really high level, and that's come into the game, in the last sort of 10 years. The nutrition side of it is vital, and the boys come in, they get fed breakfast, they have snacks, they have lunches. So as much as we can provide, we do, and then they'll have their own eating plans. And we all know some people will be better at sticking to that stuff. Some people will want to have and will stick to, sleeping elements, by specific mattresses, pillows, and all of those extras. And usually that there's a correlation between those guys, that professionalism, and people going a long way and having long careers.
We're going to crack on with talking about creative leadership in a data-driven world. I'm a little bit obsessed by this at the moment because everybody seems obsessed by data and how we're being written out of that story as human beings. So I'm trying to learn more about how the humans can interact more with the data. So from your perspective, how big a part of data and of learning from data is in your world currently?
I think there's a massive set of data that gets bounded around in rugby, and the way I like to look at it is I like to use my eyes first. What am I thinking? What am I seeing? What are my impressions? And then does the data back that up? In a game that's so open, where 15 people on each side, invasion game, so the ball could be anywhere. I think it's very difficult to be solely driven by data. I mean, some teams certainly do use it a lot, but I think it's a lot harder in open skills to apply that data, invasion games, than say the more closed skill games, the running, the swimming, the golf, things that are a little bit more like that. And then I think you have to check that the data is, how valid is that data? Often in the media, looking at rugby games, they're looking at data over 2 or 3 games. So if you take the Six Nations, for example, they'll have data about, on the third game, they'll have data about who's made the most tackles and who's done it. And it's all, what is that valid? Is that really statistically significant? And I think you have to be quite wary of the data you're getting. Data used well to back up what you're trying to achieve, to check that you are doing things in the right manner, I think is the key. But not just chasing data. I like to do it, ask the question with my head first, and then try and back it up with the data.
Have you had to kind of embrace it a bit more? There is, like you say, a sort of a skepticism sometimes around the data. Have you had to sort of embrace it a little more? And sort of, has that happened over time, or has there been a moment which it's proven to you that actually it can be really useful?
Yeah, it is useful. It is definitely useful. I think it's, yes, and there 100% has been. I think, and my mind's been changed. But I like to look at it and see what I'm getting as that first, my first impression, and then really delve into it behind the scenes to make sure, we're looking at the right parts of data. So there's lots of data, and I think in rugby, you have to be lots of the stats come from people who are looking at a game, and their definition of an ineffective tackle could be very different to mine. Yet the stats that drives out people could base their whole game plan on that, or completely change the way they're defending. And I think you have to be really careful that you're using it in the right manner. But there's on many of occasions, I remember a specific occasion a couple of years ago where we were really struggling in one area of the game, and it was actually receiving kickoffs. And this was put to me from one of our guys who's looking at all the data, and it was very obvious. Delved into it, and it was something that we absolutely needed to sort out, and we changed our whole process on that based on that coming out the stats. So I'm not belittling the stats. I just think we need to be very wary of that. We've got enough data, and let's not make sure it's based on a big range of numbers and how valid and significant the stats are.
So what do you do when you're playing a game? Obviously the data analysts are doing their piece as well. And then how do you disseminate that information afterwards? What do? Do they go back and write up a report on it? Or how do you make sure, like you say, you take out the subjectivity of it a little bit, so that it is just pure fact and what you want out of it?
Yeah, so at the start of the year, we decide what we want to come out of our stats post-game. And then, so from an attack point of view, I'll be looking at a certain key metrics. There's probably 3 or 4 key metrics that I would look at. Defence would be, there would be another 2 or 3 key metrics that we'd like to look at. And then after the game, the guys go away and those guys work hard. They work hard. They have to watch the game so closely, and it takes them such a long period of time, usually on a Saturday evening when, we're either enjoying ourselves or commiserating. They're stuck in front of a computer and they get us out by the Sunday morning. There's a stat sheet out there and a sort of the sheet how we've on all those elements that I've mentioned there, how we've done that weekend.
And how often would you say you're basing sort of outcomes and decisions on data?
It's a tough one. I think if we have one game where one of the elements that we would look at would be how well we're exiting, and are we moving the ball across the halfway line effectively, quite in simplistic terms. If we have one game where we don't do that, and our stats say if we're expecting a good game looks at like 70% perhaps, but we're at 50%. I mean, it could just be the fact that someone's dropped a ball on a wet day, and that happens a couple of times. Are you going to change your whole process based on that? Now, over a period of 4 or 5 games, you're still getting that 50% stat. You've absolutely got to look at it. So I'd say over the longer period of time, it sort of, or in a gentle sort of way, has an effect on how we coach and our processes of what we're trying to do when we're on the field.
And I guess what you're trying to do also, you're known for your sort of attacking flair and creativity. So what you don't want to do, I guess, is stifle that with data. So how do you kind of juxtapose as well the two things and make sure that there's room for both? Yeah,
I think not be reactive. And that's why when we have these few bits of data that we want to look at, we keep consistent with that. And rather than chasing something, and so if we just keep chasing, that wasn't very good this week, so let's go after this, and then something else is not good next week, let's go after that, and you end up having that sort of inconsistency in your game. So trying to get consistent bits that we are going to look at, and then I'd never coach to try and get a high stat. I think if you coach people to look for space, look for mismatches, look for opportunities, that leads to good stats. So I don't think I'd ever talk about an offload, really, but we'd be very high in the offload rankings historically, like consistently. So it's not chasing the stats, I believe. It's chasing really good rugby that drive all these stats. They drive the meters made. They drive all of these key metrics that the media love to look at, that are interesting, when you've looked at them over a period of, as a fan, over a period. But actually the coaching, the bit that I want our boys thinking about or looking for is actually looking for space, looking for mismatches, looking for opportunities, and all the other stuff happens off the back of it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. It's the right way round. Instead of chasing the data, it's actually playing the rugby really well, and the data will produce what it needs to produce for you to make it even better on the field of play. So I completely get that.
Well, I think it's important, though, because that's our way of doing it, and my belief. Yeah. But actually, there have been some very successful teams who have I think, been, have definitely taken the data into account quite firmly and been very successful. So, there's definitely different ways of doing it.
But I guess and there must be a school of thought as well, which either supports or doesn't support the idea that you go fully all in on the data piece. When you look at football clubs like Brentford or Brighton and their positions in the, in the Premier League, and actually their success based on a lot of data-driven decision making, that's obviously played off well for them. So but they're all in, right? They're all in on the data piece. But maybe that's different in the world of football to rugby. I don't know.
I was thinking, Man City a few years ago when they're absolutely in their pomp, were they chasing stats, or were they really good footballers looking for space, highly skilled people who could put the ball wherever they wanted, and they were all engaged looking for the same bits of space, and therefore they killed all the stats. And my thought on that is the latter. I think they're concentrating on what to actually do on the rugby pitch. I always think it's funny, like, we've got some great, I imagine telling Kevin De Bruyne what to do. So if you've got this stat, and I do the same thing with Alex Mitchell, he's a beautiful rugby player to watch. He creates space for anyone around him. Imagine me trying to tell him where the space is going to be. I don't know. I don't know whether he should kick it or run it, or, and I think the stats give you those things, and I want him to make decisions because that's what he's really good at. And I would believe that's what, Kevin De Bruyne has in his head.
Here's an analogy for you. Maybe it's a little bit like sat-nav. You know what I mean? It can give you a path to follow, but if you trust in it too much, you stop being creative.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. And you end up following ways down into a school.
Into whatever. A river.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious me. But with someone like Alex, so where the stats are concerned, like you say, you're not sort of your approach is very much like, we're not trying to chase that, we're trying to create opportunity. So with someone like him, do you pore over things like data, or do you not even go there and you just analyze it behind the scenes and don't have that conversation with him, the player?
No, very, very, very definitely not. And I think well,
that's interesting. Yeah. That's like a conscious decision that you've made.
Really conscious
not to do
decision.
That.
I reckon I say 5 words to Mitch every week. I say, get your head up and play what you see. There might be 6, 7 words.
Yeah,
Genuinely.
I'm just now working that out.
but that's not true the same over. I think I have with Finn, I would be talking a lot more, and we'd talk more about how to move the game up the field more. There's other bits, and I'm obviously being a little bit facetious there. I do.
But is that just reading the room and understanding which player needs what from you, or are there certain players that you work with that really appreciate the data piece and really want to lean into it?
Yeah, more so. I believe so, and I don't think Mitch is that worried about that sort of stuff. And I think that's when he plays at his best. And some of the guys, they want to know a little bit deeper about, why this is helping us as a team or why it's not helping us as a team. Finn would be a student of the game, and he likes to, delve into the why. My conversations with him are very different.
With the data piece, do you think there is still a real opportunity for unpredictability, given your approach to it, as opposed to you being led by it?
Yes, I believe so, in the way that the rugby drives, the good decision makers, the good players drive the data. I think Toulouse would be another fine example. Their stats would be killing it. They're the world's most, you said unpredictable, didn't you? They're the best, the most unpredictable attack, but they're not driven by, I very doubt they're driven by stats. They are 15 really good rugby players, highly skilled, who can see space and attack space and have an open and have an environment and a culture that encourages that. And I think that's what creates the unpredictability. That's what creates the beautiful rugby. That's what creates the flair. I don't think it's comes from the other way around. I think I value that so highly. People that can see the space and execute skills to find space for others, I think is, my favourite part of the game.
So data obviously has a role to play, but you don't, from what I'm hearing, you don't want it to dominate everything. You want to still have that creativity and that flair association. What is the next step in innovation in modern rugby, would you say? Where does it go from here?
I think there's been, in the last year, there's been a tendency to more attacking rugby. I think the way the game is and the struggles that the game's got, we need to have a sport, a game that is really easy on the eye and is, the spectators are absolutely loving it. So I think the game is going to go a little bit more, it's going to open up, it's going to be freer. I think we're going to expect more of our bigger athletes. So, a prop back 20 years ago, I remember playing with a guy called Julian White, who was the England prop. And I think Ben Youngs or Harriet, someone hit him with the pass, and he basically looked at them and shouted, "Don't pass me the ball." So I think we're going to get 15 guys, and this has been talked about for quite a while, that are really highly skilled. And I think you look at the sort of Toulouse model, Bordeaux playing rugby, Ireland have got some really good forwards that can move the ball. England have got lots of good forwards that can move the ball as well. But I think we're going to go to that. Everyone can do a little bit more with the ball. I think that'll be the next big innovation.
Are you using actively, or are the players actively using data in their recovery tracking to see how well they're sleeping, how well they're recovering? Are you paying attention to that when you're looking at the performances of individuals? Are you sort of pulling that apart?
Yeah, there's a group that wear their watches that we then look at, and there's a group you can opt in and opt out of that effectively. But when people want to do it, we are very much on board and helping them with that and how to maximise that recovery part of it. Absolutely. And the data comes so close. Now we've got GPS data and the mouth guard data, which is effectively giving out how many G's your head is taking in contacts, and they're worn throughout all our training weeks now. So that's been mandated for the last year. So that gives us
what sort of a difference has that made in terms of your sort of knowledge and understanding in that space?
Well, yeah, I mean, it gives you a gauge of what our training looks like compared to a game, and I think we were guessing before effectively, well, this is a bit of a contact session, and actually at training, it doesn't quite look like it looks in a game, and I suppose it's never going to, but you can actually quantify it now. That's quite new, so I'm not sure we've got enough data to really know exactly, to make big process changes to what it should look like. But we're trying, and and the game and the RFU and are trying to drive standards so that we're not getting too many G's going through the head in when we can control that. I mean, specifically, people have been, if you get a gum shield reading that is over X amount, people have been pulled out of matches, but also training as well.
And is that all something that's being sort of mandated across the clubs and also internationally as well? Is that something that everyone's moving forwards in the same direction on, so that there is sort of a common understanding and learnings that can come from that, and it's not just sort of siloed with any one group of people? No,
that is mandated, and I think it's such a positive step forward to get as many people playing our game for as long as possible, because it's such a positive impact on people's lives. I
guess in other areas of the sporting world, you see longevity has become such a big part of so many people's sporting worlds. When you look at various tennis players, or even I look at Ben still sailing at that level of sort of 47/8. But it's amazing, isn't it, how many athletes are still able to operate at a high level at this moment in our lives? Is rugby benefiting from that as well? Are we seeing that in rugby too, or is it the sort of sport that doesn't perhaps support that?
Well, I don't think it quite supports getting to 47. I don't think there's many we made 47-year-olds, but I can't remember which basketball player it was who spent £1 million on his body, or that was the chat, wasn't it? And that stuff is all leaking down, and perhaps we're not at the same in terms of financial economics of the NBA, but some of that is trickling down and players are making decisions based on that. A lot of the gym work now looks a lot more at future-proofing the body than, just getting big, strong pecs and biceps. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot more to keeping people durable and on the pitch, which is hugely part of being a good rugby player. The more times, the best ability is availability, as they say.
And I suppose that Wednesday coffee session, that is actually a genuine rest day for a good reason, not just for an opportunity to go and grab the best possible Americano.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and it's needed as well. And it's intense. And the game, we ask a lot of these athletes from them mentally as well as physically. They need days off. And I think there's only lots of clubs. 5 years ago, lots of clubs were training on the Friday, the day before the game, and I'd be very surprised if many of the clubs are now training on that day, because it's just extra miles in the tank. We can be more efficient, and what do you gain from it? It's not really worth it. So the game's getting more is growing, and an understanding, and we're using all the data that we have from all those various bits of kit to make those decisions.
Yep, sounds sensible and savvy at the same time. Sam, thank you so much.
Thank you.